Hello and welcome to this Thursday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Donald Trump barred from Colorado's 2024 presidential primary ballot, as well as that US-led coalition to create safe corridor in the Red Sea as ship diversions mount. We've got lots to talk about on the charts. Also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around till you see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. But the first article to talk about, of course, is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has been disqualified from Colorado's Republican presidential primary, and this comes as a result of his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election result. Now, we've been covering the Republican primaries quite in depth, as well as the issues in relation to both Joe Biden's presidency and the successes of Joe Biden's presidency. Along with that, we've been covering the legal challenges which have been placing Trump, and this does seem to be another one which is mounting on the pile facing Trump at the moment. And if we think back, Trump is both facing civil and criminal court proceedings at the moment in relation to his conduct, as well as issues in relation to the January 6th insurrection, or whatever you'd like to call it. There was key issues in relation to that period and that attempt against democracy, one could say, and therefore we're now seeing kind of the results of this, the consequences of such being acted out as we are in the run-up to the 2024 presidential primary ballots. Now, the presidential primary does begin very soon now. It will be beginning at the start of 2024, and therefore having such a landmark ruling in the lead up to such a important part of democracy, that being the primaries, we are kind of seeing very politicized, kind of judiciary kind of ruling. And this is what we're hearing from many of the Republican figures within the party. Now we know that Trump is the figurehead within is the leading figure, I guess, within the Republican primaries. That said, he hasn't been engaging in many of the primary debates. I don't believe he's engaged in any of them so far, which is why we do have kind of these up and comers like Vivek Ramaswamy, and as well as that Nikki Haley, which is putting themselves on the map for the presidential primary. These individuals are starting to make themselves more well known because Trump is not engaging in those debates. But despite that, Trump is still leading in the ballots by far, and even with those recent polls showing Trump leading in the overall presidential election polls already. So Trump is the favorite going into the 2024 presidential election. He's he's the favorite in the primaries as well. So the reaction from this decision could be very, very great. Now, the Colorado Supreme Court said Trump could not run due to the 14th Amendment, which prevents US officers involved in an insurrection from holding office in the United States of America. This marks another legal setback for Trump, with him already fighting on other civil and criminal cases, all the while seeking to secure a second term in the White House. And this ruling could set up a battle before the US Supreme Court, creating new ramifications. Now, this is in relation to Colorado Supreme Court. Of course, the kind of judicial power is largely federalized across different states within the US, but ultimately the US Supreme Court does kind of reign supreme. And so the issue, or at least the chance and kind of the probabilities and the risks of this ruling, is that it does now go to the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, and therefore create an even larger landmark ruling, which could either, of course, create far larger consequences for Donald Trump and increase the legal challenges already facing him, or in fact it could shut down all these challenges to him. So this is why it's so important to kind of stay on top of and understand. Now, the Colorado court voted 4-3 that Trump should be disqualified. So this is this is a clear majority decision by the Supreme Court. Of course, 3 people against the 4 within the court, and reportedly, according to certain individuals, this court was largely Democrat supported, or at least kind of nominated by mainly Democrats. And the controversial decision is amplified by the fact that Trump is the primary frontrunner. As I did mention at the start, him being that primary frontrunner, means that many people do support Trump and want him as president. And so if we're now seeing kind of the judiciary kind of denying individuals from being able to vote in their favourite candidate, that being the majority favourite candidate, we could then see great ramifications in relation to civil unrest, of course, and other issues, which is why this is such a big issue, or at least could escalate into a much larger issue. Now, Trump's campaign responded by saying the order was completely flawed and would be appealed against using the US Supreme Court. And that's what we were just talking about. That's what could cause this great escalation and therefore create far larger problems either for Trump or shut down this entire kind of battle against him for the primary ballots. Now, key Republican figures also responded, with the Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, of course, being more of a conservative Republican within the House, saying the ruling was nothing more than a thinly veiled partisan attack. And that's what we've been hearing from many of these Republican figures, is that this decision is a political one, rather than one that's purely based on, the readings of the Constitution. Now, key primary candidate Ron DeSantis also responded, saying the left invokes democracy to justify its power, even if it means abusing judicial power. And this was actually the arguments that were largely made by Trump following the Jan 6 insurrection, as we did hear from Trump that these kind of new legal challenges which were suddenly facing Trump over his finances before he became president, in relation to his business, in relation to January 6 as well, in relation to his prior relationships, in relation to the way he handles documents, these are simply matters of political kind of the politicization of the judicial branch of the US government, and therefore creating this kind of fight between these two key aspects and powers within the US government. Now, legal efforts to disqualify Trump in other states such as Minnesota, Arizona, and Michigan have so far fallen short, but a ruling by the Supreme Court could create more problems or shut them down across the country altogether. So this is very key and very important to keep your eyes on, as it will be adding to both world tensions, but also be affecting the way the US stock market is perceiving the future economy of the United States and the future kind of stability of the United States. So keep your eyes on this. Next article to talk about, though, is the US coalition. Now, ship owners and a US led military coalition are attempting to build a security pact in the Red Sea, and this comes as over 100 vessels divert around Africa to avoid attacks by Houthis in Yemen. Now, we've been covering the issues in relation to the Red Sea greatly, and this has largely been a result as our coverage of the Israel-Gaza war, where we've mainly covered the battles ensuing within Gaza, the attacks on October the 7th by Hamas, and the outbreak of violence as a result of that. And we've been largely covering these kind of topics, mainly focusing on Hamas or Israel, but ultimately the Houthis have continued to kind of make their name known within the conversation in relation to making and engaging in attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Now, Yemen, of course, is very close to the Horn of Africa, and kind of marks that strait and safe and that corridor into the Red Sea. Therefore, it's quite a strategic kind of area for powers, and the Houthis, that being a Shia militia group funded by Iran, is making their presence known against Israel by attacking certain commercial vessels which apparently have relations to Israel, despite maybe not having relations to them for many, many years. Now, this has created large issues, of course, for commercial vessels, as over 10, I believe over 10, correct me if I'm wrong, over 10 commercial vessels have already been attacked or had to deal with these attacks, with hijacking taking place as seen on the article in front, as well as attacks through missiles and drones also hitting these vessels. And this is scaring off many of these ship owners that want to bolster their security and not be damaged in the process of moving cargo. Now, the Pentagon revealed that with over 6 allies, Operation Prosperity Garden is a strong naval task force to establish a strong, safe corridor in the Red Sea for commercial shipping, with ships and aircraft from multiple nations joining the US in conducting marine security. And this comes as huge numbers of vessels have rerouted to take a 3,200-mile journey around Africa following the attacks of over 15 ships in the region since November 18th. With the Houthis attacking vessels with links to Israel despite little connection for years, with the biggest reshaping of global trade since the Russian invasion into Ukraine, and it risks causing long queues at ports, supply chain disruptions, and driving inflation higher, with oil rising 1.4% yesterday, reaching over $80, taking gains to over 9% in 9 days. Now, the change in trade flows also will deprive Egypt of significant revenue from the Suez Canal and instead allow South Africa to hit a monthly record for fuel imports, with ship owners also looking to bolster their own marine security. So very interesting situations taking place within the Red Sea and on the Horn of Yemen. Keep your eyes on this. It will be adding to world tensions. It will be affecting oil prices, as we've mentioned, and ultimately largely affecting inflation across the world, as it will be disrupting global trade. So keep your eyes on this. That's all to talk about in the articles, though. Next to talk about, of course, is the charts, where we do have quite a bit happening with, just in the last hour, actually seeing a sell-off on US indices, as we were seeing some consolidation take place at those highs. And now we are seeing this dramatic sell-off to the downside, where we're now nearing that 3820 Fibonacci level, which is in line with the highest high of the US 30 before we broke through it, following that more dovish rhetoric from the Fed and Jerome Powell. This is very interesting, of course, as we could now see a massive reaction from the 3820 to the upside. But of course, US indices have been slowing most recently after that move to the upside from that more dovish rhetoric. We did see that move to the upside, then that small consolidation, and now we're kind of seeing this sell-off to the downside as we may begin a retracement. So the key areas I would be saying to look out for is, of course, that 3820 and maybe that 6180, which lines up with those key areas of accumulation prior. If we look on the RSI, for example, we were in that overbought territory after that more dovish rhetoric from Powell, and we were kind of forming this bearish divergence, as you can kind of note here and here. So it's unsurprising that we're now seeing a bit of a retracement, but definitely keep your eyes on this as we do find new levels to the downside. Next to talk about, of course, though, is the dollar, which also continues to consolidate. Now, this is kind of to be expected, despite lots of very important rhetoric most recently from Powell and other figures and central bank leaders. This rhetoric is limited in its ability to affect markets when we consider the fact that we are now concluding the year of 2023. We are also approaching the Christmas holidays, if not possibly already being in the Christmas holidays, and so consolidation in the markets is to be expected. And this will largely be the story for markets, I guess, going into the rest of this week, as markets do quieten down as individuals exit the market and enjoy their holiday. So quite possibly we will be seeing the slowdown take place on assets such as the dollar, which of course have been highly volatile most recently, and currently we are seeing this consolidation. So whilst we do have that 3820 and liquidity level to the upside acting as a very strong area of resistance, and to the downside we do have this strong area of support, we aren't likely to see too much volatility, I guess. We could be very wrong, but we aren't too likely, just based on the fact that markets do slow down over the holidays. That's all to talk about in the dollar. Next to talk about, though, is Euro USD, which a bit like the dollar, I guess, because it is a dollar pair. is kind of also kind of consolidating. We were kind of expecting a continuation to the upside after coming into contact with that 38.20 in liquidity level. However, we did kind of see now a counter retracement which is taking place. Quite possibly we're going to now form a flag or something like that, or just continue to range around these two liquidity zones coming into the end of this year before we then start accessing some new liquidity into the new year. So keep your eyes on this as price does kind of range. Next to talk about though is pound yen, where we are now seeing a slight bearish move to a bearish sell-off, despite seeing some inflation data come out earlier yesterday, showing in fact that inflation had come in below expectations for November. I believe the headline figure that was seen is 3.9% for UK inflation in November, in comparison to 4.4%, which was economists' expectation. So coming in far below expectations, which should of course create a large bullish momentum to the upside. However, we are experiencing great bullish momentum for the yen at the same time, so it's unsurprising that we're seeing this weak performance on pound yen at the moment. Keep your eyes on this though, as we do sit on this key liquidity level. Next to talk about though is Bitcoin, which is also in an interesting area, just because it has now broken above this range that we were seeing price interact with, and we've now broken above that, and quite possibly we are now going to retest this area. So if we do retest this area, we could see a continuation to the upside, but of course keep your eyes on Fed rhetoric from the Fed, as we do know that this is largely influencing Bitcoin at the moment. That's all to talk about on Bitcoin. Next to talk about, of course, is gold, where there isn't too much to say. Gold, just like yesterday when we last reported on it, is continuing to range as well, and is staying between these levels of around 2045 and 2020, where price is constantly kind of bouncing off these liquidity levels and not making a significant move to either the upside or the downside. But once again, this is to be expected. We are ending off this year. Consolidation is likely. That loss of momentum is likely. But ultimately, I think it's still important to keep your eyes on the markets to understand when we might then, as a result of the lack of momentum, when fundamentals might, depart then from the charts when, momentum falls, and then we can find that kind of undersold or overbought kind of territories to make trades from. So keep your eyes on gold. Next to talk about though is oil, which has now come into contact with that $80 a barrel level, which we did talk about on that second article. We have seen a sell-off from that area, as it is the 61.80 as well as a key liquidity level as well. So quite possibly we'll now see a sell side move. That said, the overwhelming fundamentals in relation to this escalating issue in relation to Houthis and the Red Sea could drive oil higher further, despite other fundamental factors. So keep your eyes on this when we're considering, technical opportunities. That's all to talk about on the charts though. Lastly to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, where we do have quite a bit of data coming out today. Now, firstly, we'll be getting British public sector borrowing figure. As well as that, we're getting French business confidence figure, along with the Canadian retail sales data. Moving on to the US, we will be getting the US GDP growth rate figure, so very important, arguably the most important figure of the day. As well as that, we're getting US continuing jobless claims figure, as well as the US PCE prices figure, and finally we'll be getting Japanese inflation rate figure, along with the Bank of Japan's monetary policy meeting minutes. So lots of data coming up today. Make sure you listen out for that, and have a great trading day today. That's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.